What's up, everybody? Welcome to Salah's Corner with the one and only Salah Muhammad. Still miss the air horns, I'm just saying.
I kind of do too.
Like, it's just so much easier if niggas is acting right. I'm gonna ask
just
them.
stop touching shit. You know what I'm saying? Stop fucking with the board.
We are back with another episode.
We are.
What's going on, Farah?
I mean, trying things,
Trying
doing things.
Trying things, doing things. What's new? What's the things you're trying and doing?
I kind of just want to work on those for a little bit, and then
keep them in the tuck for now.
Yeah, I just want to work on them. I don't want to, because I'm always talking about things that I want to do or I'm planning to do, and then I never do them. So and not that I'm not doing what's going on in my life, but I kind of just want to just do it, and then once I feel like it's ready for the world, then I'll share.
Listen, that's how you do it. Work behind closed doors. Don't let nobody see it until you ready to release it. I got projects that I'm working on that I got the approval on some of them, but the others I won't announce yet. But I can announce the one on May 29th. We're going to do another yoga in the park event.
Yeah,
it's going to be at Malcolm X Park this time.
Oh, it's going to be. Oh, that's right. You did. Yeah.
It's going to be dope.
Do I want to do yoga in the park? I don't know.
I mean, I'm not going to do yoga in the park. I'm just going I'm just going to be there.
I'll be there in my yoga pants.
But we're gonna do some yoga. I might do something else. Might do some type of either singing, dancing, or meditation, something. We're gonna have some black business owners, vendors out there, so come out there and support y'all black businesses. That's gonna be May 29th.
Hopefully that crowd that was out there the other day won't be blasting their 80s hip hop.
Hopefully not, but we'll see. You never know. You know Philly folks care. We don't care either way.
Listen,
but if they are,
the more the merrier.
We'll make it a vibe. That's what the kids say nowadays, right? It's a vibe,
I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, politics meets pop culture. We haven't had one in a while. Do we have anything this week?
I don't think so.
I feel like there's something that's out there.
Again, everything we do is pop culture and political.
True.
I can't think of anything out there right now.
Yeah, no, I can't think of anything either. We can go on to everything is local. You got anything for that? I got a couple things.
Just the cleanup that's coming up in June.
You always got the good ones though when we get to this segment.
I didn't do my research this week.
That's what it really is. No, there's a couple of things that's been happening. I'm sure many of you have either saw on my Instagram or just caught the news lately, but all of the shit that's been happening with the victims and family of the Move bombing.
Oh yeah.
So much, right? A few weeks ago.
And that's my neighborhood.
Yeah, a few weeks ago it was the Princeton and Penn with the remains that professor basically held on to and used to study and shit like that. And
the courses on that were actually live courses.
Yeah. And then there was the health commissioner then deciding to, back in 2017 it just came public that he told the coroner's office to cremate remains from victims of the Move bombing. Ultimately, they ended up finding the remains. That didn't end up happening, but he still directed them to from the gate. So he had to be forced to resign. It's been issue after issue over this, all over the fact that the city initially never even wanted to issue an apology. I still feel like they should get reparations. What's your thoughts?
The city is just... It's it's a terrorist organization. How do you drop a bomb on a fucking neighborhood?
I keep trying to tell people, Philly is a modern day Gotham, or a real life Gotham City.
Yeah, because like I said, that's the neighborhood I grew up in. So something is different about that block specifically because the houses are different. So it's why are those houses different? And you don't understand. And then it's just... It's just fucked up.
It's fucked up. And you know what's crazy about it though is if you talk to anyone from West Philly or that has been attached to the city, they remember it or they talk about it like it's fresh. And this was in 1985. But not a lot of people outside of Philly know about this.
Yeah, no, that was Yeah, it's definitely one of those Philly things. Every city has their thing that's in that city, and it should be widely known, and it's not. And Move is definitely the Philly thing that everyone should know about and doesn't.
Yeah, no, that's Philly's crazy ass history, Scarlet Letter. But there's a couple of different stories like that in Philly. But a lot of the other cities though, like they're widely known.
And it was the second move situation that the city just terrorized them with.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I wonder if the family, any other survivors that's there will ever have any like real reparations done from the city, whether that's payments, whether that's something bigger than just some stupid apology that they half-assed didn't want to give to begin with. Like I just wonder if there's ever something bigger that's going to happen.
If you haven't seen it already, HBO, it should still be up. HBO has a documentary about the movie. It's called 40 Years a Prisoner, and it follows the Africa family and discusses one of the sons of two of the MOVE members who were incarcerated, his journey to free his family. So it's a great documentary. It gives you a lot of context of the original MOVE situation that happened here. The MOVE terrorism, I should say. The terrorism of the MOVE people, not the bombing that we're talking about, but the first one. So it gives a lot of good context to that. So I definitely suggest, if you haven't seen it, to definitely check it out.
I haven't checked it out yet. We might need to dedicate like a full episode to that. Maybe we'll I wonder if we can ever reach out and interview someone about it. But
I'm sure the Africa family would be more than happy to talk about their side of it, and not just what the media and the powers that be, they want you to know.
Yeah, I have to watch the HBO special, and then maybe we'll do the reach out. We'll have them on in a future episode.
That's good.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and then we have a special guest in the studio.
I'm so excited for this guest. You have no idea.
I know I've been teasing it for a few weeks now.
Yes.
So I finally made it happen.
We're here.
And so we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be back with our main topic. Here at Salah's Corner, I am always looking to connect with new people, hear new perspectives, and share new stories. And right now, I want to hear from you. Email me at realtalk@salascorner.com, and we can get your story featured on our next episode. All right, welcome back to our main topic. We have a very important guest in the studio.
We do. We have like an esteemed guest.
An esteemed guest. I want to tell you how esteemed you are because you got the exclusive entrance into the studio.
Yes, no one comes in that way. You are like.
Well, honestly, what it was closest to the bathroom. They know I really needed to go, so they saw the pain in my eyes, and they're like, "Just get him in, just get him in."
All right, the folks hear your voice. We have State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta here in the building. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy you were able to find time in your busy schedule because I know you're a busy man. You have a number of things on your plate right now.
A couple of things going on.
Just
a
small.
couple.
Like, aren't you like running for something?
Just a little run for U.S. Senate.
Nothing too big.
First and foremost, I would love for the people to get to know who you are
Yes.
as an individual and what got you onto this journey that you're on. So can you talk about just, let's start from the basics. Where are you from originally, and where your background? Where does that come from?
Yep. So I'm from North Philly. Born and raised on the playground. Spent very few of my days. Was not athletic. So, third generation North Philly. My parents divorced and I was pretty young. My dad was a social worker. My mom was trained as a CNA, was a home health care aide for most of her career, working with folks who had, pretty severe physical and mental disabilities. And so that's what she did. And, I have three siblings who my parents adopted, and then one additional sibling, my extra sister, who was never officially adopted, but was a foster child for a long time with us. And so that's sort of how we grew up. We grew up in a way a lot of people did, on that sort of treadmill of poverty, right? You're working, but every month you're sort of patching it all together, trying to figure it all out, make all the pieces fit. And I learned that very early. We have, an economy that is really upside down. I mean, you think about it, through this pandemic, if you were a billionaire, pandemic was like really good for you, actually.
Came out like a bandit.
Like seriously.
Yeah.
You know, added trillions of dollars they did collectively, like, to their wealth. Whereas you had, you know, service workers who still are trying to get, you know, back pay for hazard pay and still trying to get a level of dignity that is commiserate with those big ass signs we saw. There's a bunch of big ass signs saying like heroes. And then they're like, okay, can you pay me?
I need some hero wages.
Yeah, they was like, Superman didn't do it for the check.
Right.
So, you know, that's really where we are. We see this, you know, the same story over and over and over again, that folks who do the jobs that make all of our lives function aren't treated with the level of dignity that ought to be connected to the, you know, essential work that they do. And so I saw that very early on with my parents, how tough it was, even though they had, you know, jobs that are critical in our community.
And so it sounds like your parents laid a really strong foundation for you as a model of, you know, what was important, you know, life skills and things like that was important. Where'd you go to school from there? Did you go to school in Philly or?
Yeah, I did. I went to a bunch of different schools, graduated from Roxborough, but, you know, we moved 5 times growing up.
I feel like that's the Philly, that's the Philly thing too, like constantly moving all the time.
Yeah, and you know what? And in retrospect, you know, I didn't know at the time, you know, what ACEs were, these adverse childhood experiences. You know, I had no idea what that was. But seriously, what it does to young people to not have a level of stability in housing and stability in knowing that, you know, you're going to have lights, that you'll definitely have something to eat. Those things, you know, impact us in a really negative way. And that's one of the things, you know, deep poverty, first campaign I ran, that's really what it was all about and what it's still about. Because as I said, not only is it upside down, but it's gotten harder for folks in neighborhoods like mine, because we have seen the cost of things, the cost of goods skyrocket. But we've seen wages really be stagnant. And there are, you know, parts of my district where the average income is under $10,000 a year. And
that's amazing.
You know, just think about, in this country, wealthiest country that the world has ever seen, and yet we still have people who can't find stability with their housing, you know, have to ration their insulin like my mom had to, or my dad rationing his, you know, his epilepsy medicine. And I lost both of them before I was 27.
Wow.
And so, you know, I've seen firsthand what it means when government doesn't function the way that it ought to function. And I think the way it ought to function is ought to center the needs of the people that actually make this country prosper. And it's not a couple of, you know, rich businessmen. It's all the workers who are so often faceless, nameless, and who, as I said, are not paid, are not resourced more broadly outside of pay in a way that they ought to be. And so for me, that's what politics has always been about. You know, I got into this because really I had no fucking choice, right? It's about survival. But how do we move our communities from surviving to thriving?
Right.
And then that's what we've been working on.
It's we have this recurring theme.
We were just talking about this
too,
like separate conversation away from the podcast.
Yeah,
that's where the real conversation. See, you listeners, they're not giving you the real conversation. They have a separate non-podcast conversation.
We have very explicit conversations.
Oh yeah, no, this is, you know, no holds barred, you know.
But it's a running theme, like he was about to say.
Yeah, no, it's a running theme of like the what introduces so many folks, particularly Black people, into this either work or activism or education around, you know, political or civic engagement is a pain point. And it's this narrative that we keep every time we have a new guest. We pull that out of them, and that you know, we find that that's a recurring theme. Your history and how you got into politics aside, like what's your thoughts around that as being the catalyst for just, you know, sounds like it was for yourself, but also so many others being civically activated.
Well, I'll say this, you know, with all of the issues we have in this country, and they're like, we could just spend the podcast just listing, you know, issues that exist, but we still are incredibly blessed
Yeah.
when you put what's happening here in comparison. But what that means is I'm reminded all the time, and I'm like a broken record with this. And so if folks listening now have heard me on something else, I'm like, no, stop saying that, but it's important. There's nothing written on some damn tablet somewhere that says America's going to be successful.
Yeah.
You know,
But
this
people
is not
think
a
that,
movie.
though.
Yeah, it's not a movie.
It's the exceptionalism that we were talking
We talked about that yesterday.
It's that American exceptionalism, like we can do whatever we want because.
And
it
it's not
automatically
correct.
makes you think that you will succeed because of XYZ.
Yeah, and you know, you think about the length of our nation. We are like a baby as a country in terms of just years when you relate us to other world powers that we've seen over time. And so we are babies. And so when you think about the civic engagement, part of what I hope drives folks to stay engaged is this understanding that we only have this if we do the work to keep it. That citizenship requires something of us beyond just voting. And for everybody, that's not running for office. For some people, it's having a podcast and talking about issues that matter. But we all have a role to play in fostering a community and a country more broadly that sees everybody, that lifts folks up, and that continues the work. You know, Coretta Scott King, you know, said it well, that, you know, freedom is won and re-won by every generation. And so, you know, I see this as a continuation of our responsibility, to criticize this country, but also to construct, because we love this country. And we have to do it to make it better for folks. So stories like mine are less common. You know, and I talk about my story, my background, and some people say, oh my God, no, that's a bad story.
Yeah.
Like, that's a bad story.
Yeah.
And it should not exist in this country. It shouldn't exist.
And you know, I'm glad you called that out as being a bad story, because I think what we gravitate towards is, oh my God, and you overcame so much.
Right.
Correct.
It's like, but damn, what if I didn't have to?
It's like trauma porn.
Yes.
Oh,
Ridiculous.
absolutely.
Like it's insane. Just the idea that I mean, even our story is like we move from abandoned house to abandoned house. Like that should not be the American reality.
Right.
Correct.
It just should not. It shouldn't be the reality, period. But especially in America, because we are the richest nation in the world, we are the superpower. It just shouldn't be the case. It's difficult to
you're absolutely
describe.
right. And this is the good news, but it's the work ahead of us, right? That it doesn't have to be the case, right? These are policy decisions
Right.
that we haven't made, and then there are real implications to that. And so, you know, when I talk about politics, I say to folks, it's not like something fucking hypothetical that like, oh, I read a book about, oh, that sounds really bad. This is something I know in my bones, something you know, in your bones. But every time I get depressed, I get so inspired by people who refuse to accept the status quo as the final answer. And that is ultimately, been the recurrent theme for me, that it doesn't have to be the final answer, that we can call out where we are, but this is not the end of the story. And there is something so powerful about people not getting caught up in a politician. I mean, I'm so sick of that, where we, idolize this one person. I tell everybody, listen, I want you to vote for me, but I don't need you to be a part of my cult. I don't need you to put all your hopes and dreams into me. But do put your hopes and dreams into what happens when we build coalition, when we build movements that are big enough and bold enough to meet these systemic issues head on, so stories like yours, stories like mine, become less and less common, and that we don't have to have this hard knock life, but that everybody in this country can live with a level of dignity. And I think that we've gotten to a place where enough folks don't believe that that's possible. Some folks do believe that, like, you have to have some folks who are living in deep poverty for this to work. We don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
There is plenty. There are plenty of resources. The question is, how do we ensure that there is a floor and a level of, and I keep going back to that word, a level of dignity for everybody.
Speaking of dignity, just totally separate, and I'm going to get back to an actual question for you. I just recently see, there's a lot of folks talking on social media and the weird spaces out there about like people not, or different companies, especially retail places, service workers, finding it hard to find a workforce because people want to just be paid to stay home because of this, right? And recently I just saw a meme that was constantly being shared about like the joy of someone finding the job for the first time in like months, and like the excitement on their faces, and like they started dancing, and I was just like, I thought back to that moment of when I was out of work for an extended period, and regardless of if I was able to make bills paid and things like that, when I did finally find a job, it was like, damn, I did something. Like there was a sense of pride and dignity, like you mentioned, and a sense of accomplishment that comes with that. And it just, it just thrust into my mind back, no, people aren't just at home because they just want to be.
Yeah, and that's the same trope that we've heard since Reagan. Anybody who's actually had to
the whole
welfare
queen
correct,
narrative.
But anybody who's actually had to be on SNAP, and you're standing at that grocery store, and even if you live in a community where a bunch of people are on SNAP, the level of shame that you feel pulling out that card,
or back in the day when it was the food stamp,
when it was the actual, yes,
and you pulling out this book and you're like, nobody is like, yes, yeah, that's what I want. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
Give me a break. And everybody knows that's nonsense. What people are saying is that the wages that we were paying folks are not enough for people to take care of their families. And so if you are a service worker making a starvation level wage, $7.25, how do you make enough to take care of your kid and get them into child care?
Yeah.
I mean, child care right now is the cost of a mortgage over the life of a child. Cost of a mortgage. And so people aren't wanting to stay home because they want to get an extra $300. People are so desperate. And we have not, as I said, allowed wages to keep up. And so if we want to get folks back to work, we need to pay folks a decent wage, ensure that every single person has access to high quality health care. And frankly, a lot of the folks who kept us going through the pandemic never stopped working. Folks working at the grocery store and our sanitation workers who, before we even truly understood this virus, were going into that grocery store every single day, serving folks to make sure we were fed, to sell folks too much toilet paper. Y'all never needed all that toilet paper.
I still don't understand the whole toilet paper thing. I don't get it.
And they're at the store suffering and afraid. Are you stacking up on all this toilet paper?
I still don't get it.
What did people do with it?
I'm trying to figure it out myself. I don't.
That is my biggest question out of the pandemic.
I'm trying to figure out this whole. It's the same thought process, but with the gas shit.
I was just about to say that.
Like,
it's the gasoline.
why the fuck are you getting all of this gas?
Gasoline in bags.
I get it, but like, no, don't do that.
Also, what are you going to do with it when it's in the bag?
Fucking bag.
How are you going to get it back to anyway?
How are you going to get it into your?
That's a hole that we dare not go down. And so let's get back to.
I saw that tweet and I was like, I can't.
I can't.
I have other things to do.
Way more important conversations to be had, which is this one. And so I want to talk specifically. The mission of this platform, this podcast, is to find folks, particularly folks who don't feel like the system, civic engagement, is doing anything for them, see it as important to engage with it, regardless of whether or not they vote or take the census or all of those types of things, right? I just got my jury duty notice in the card in the mail today, whether they show up for jury duty, right? And so as an elected official who's been serving Philadelphia, who's from Philadelphia, what can you do, and what has your office been doing, and especially as you look and vie for higher office, to not just engage that disenfranchised or unengaged demographic, or doesn't have faith in the system, but also bring them in and their thoughts and their passions to find solutions to the problems that they know they have and that they know exist, but can't connect it to the civic engagement.
Yeah, so what I say to folks is two things, right? first I want to acknowledge the fact that the system doesn't work for a lot of people. Doesn't work. And so I want to be real in acknowledging that that lack of trust is grounded in something that's real. But I say it particularly to young people. I say, oh, well, I don't do politics. Well, politics does you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not you engage does not make you immune to the end result of the decisions that are made on your behalf.
Yeah.
And so we find this really nasty chicken or the egg situation. Is the system broken because it's irrevocably broken? Or is the system broken because enough of us haven't understood that we are the system? Mm. So when you talk about the they and there's always this mystic they, you're a part of the they.
Yeah.
And when folks decide to be bystanders to their government and their democracy, what they invite is a level of disrespect that they continually receive. And the last thing I'll say is when you say that, oh, well, them and those politicians, whatever, a part of what you're doing is giving away your power. Mm-hmm. You're giving away your power. You think about this municipal election we're about to have tomorrow.
Yeah.
The turnout is going to be low. It's going to be low. And we're about to decide tomorrow who the district attorney will be. We're going to decide tomorrow judges who are going to be on the bench for 10 years. Folks who will be empowered to take your property, to literally take your right of mobility.
Your freedom.
To take your physical freedom. And you have a lot of folks who are like, oh, well, I just voted a couple of months ago. I don't need to vote anymore. And so it's one of those things where, and I'm going to mangle this quote from Plato, but he says, when you don't engage your penance, is you get to be ruled by your inferiors. The folks who don't give a damn, the folks who are fine with everything as it is, those folks show up every election. They show up. In a lot of cases, some of these folks are running for office. Some of the people I work with, I'm like, wow, I need that level of confidence because you're a fool. Yeah. But they were like, yeah, I ought to be in office. Like, no, you should not be.
Yeah.
You should be near nothing. But we have to do both. We have to acknowledge the historic harms that create that level of apathy. But also we have to acknowledge that our apathy is a part of how those historic harms are allowed to continue.
Yeah.
I agree. I 100% agree. And so when it comes to, let's talk specifics then with engaging that. I've talked to different city council members. We've had them on the podcast. I've talked to different state reps and state senators and, folks, not just on the podcast, but outside of this platform. And a lot of folks agree and say those same things, but they don't do. Right. And so what makes you different?
This is what I believe. What I believe is that we need to have folks who run for office, first of all, who look like the country. Folks that reflect the fullness of the American experience. And I don't just mean that in terms of being black, but people who've had a wide variety of different experiences. Because a part of it is it's really difficult, particularly for young people, to be something you can't see. And it's really difficult to get invested in something when you don't hear a story that sounds similar to your story being told. And so that's a part of it. But I reject unequivocally the notion that the folks who are elected to office are the end-all, be-all of our civic society. And that if we, and it's why I said we give away our power. When we say, well, everything that happens in my community is the result of what my state rep are doing or my council person is doing or not doing, a part of what that does is to say, they have my power. Some of the most impactful people in our nation's history have never been elected to a damn thing. Mm-hmm. Have never been elected to a damn thing. And so
I can name one in particular.
You can name a bunch.
that we all know, but anyway.
You can name a bunch who have never been elected to anything. And so elected officials, that's one part of it. But when I talk about that coalition that's big enough and bold enough, in my mind, that coalition doesn't center the elected official. It's like, you think about, a football team. It's not just the quarterback. And we've seen a lot of teams not do well because you got one star player and you're like, who the hell, where are the rest of the folks doing? That's not how we're going to be successful. And particularly when you have folks say, well, this person who I like, they got elected, just I'm done. I voted for you. You're good. See you later. I'll see you in a couple of years and you'll fix all the problems. Like, no. Listen, I think me being elected is important. But if the folks who are feeding people in their community say, well, Malcolm's in, I don't have to feed anybody anymore. Or folks who are community activists are saying, well, I don't have to write no petitions anymore or call elected officials. Like, I'm done. Somebody I like got in there. That's not how we find sustainable change. You can draw a direct line from this quick story when I was 11 years old to now. I was 11, living on this block, Woodstock Street. And I came home and I was, complaining to my mom about the stuff on the block. And usually I take out the cuss words, but I'm leaving it today.
That is completely fine with us. So we drop a lot of F-bombs.
All right, good. So she said, you know what? If you care so fucking much, why don't you go do something about it? She didn't say call your elected official. She didn't say call the streets department. She said, if you care so much, why don't you go do something about it? And it's that voice. And for me, it was my mom directly, but it's that voice we all have. And just think about it. You walking down the street, you see something on the ground that you want to pick up. That is, for me, I come from a Christian faith tradition, but it doesn't matter what your tradition is. That is, whatever you believe, speaking something into you that you're supposed to have a role in. And so voting is one part of a fully balanced civic diet. It's one part of it. And it's incumbent upon folks to recognize that.
You talked a lot about this coalition, right? Like working with a coalition to actually affect, structural systemic change. And, let's just talk about Philadelphia, right? And so what does that coalition look like for you? What types of organizations, things, what is that comprised of when you talk about that coalition building?
It's comprised of folks who understand that we can be better than this. That we can be better than this. And I think about the summer, the murder of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. We passed 4 bills around reforming our police. Now, are there more bills we need to pass? Hell yeah. But let me explain how those bills got passed. They didn't get passed, and these bills didn't get introduced, mind you, because this tragedy occurred. These bills had existed, right? So a good state rep had run for office, won, introduced a good bill. That bill was not being moved. In some instances, a couple of the ideas had been around for multiple sessions.
And just
never got a hearing,
tabled.
right? Just tabled, not even brought up, okay? Not even brought on the damn table. Yep. How did that happen? Yes, you had myself and members of the Black Caucus who very much in the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer and John Lewis held a sit-in on the speaker's rostrum and said, we're not moving until you move some piece of legislation that can help make folks safe. Yes, that was a part of it. But a big part of what happened is we saw protests in 61 of 67 counties. 61 of 67 counties. To do that in Pennsylvania, that's tough to get 61 counties doing something. But that's what drove it. And there was so much pressure in the streets from a lot of different folks. Folks in organized labor, folks who are a part of activist organizations, but also just people who aren't a part of any official organization, but who were driven to say, I want the country and the city that I live in to be better than this, to be better than this. And they used their voices. They used their feet. They wrote letters. They made phone calls. And that allowed important reforms to begin the process of moving. Now, there were other bills that we wanted to move and that we thought were important to move. But there's not the same energy in the streets at this moment. And so the question becomes, how do we build a coalition that's not just activated around an election or just activated around a tragedy, but that is self-sustained around a vision of our community where every single person feels safe?
Can you talk a little bit about that legislation that ended up being successful?
Yeah, it was 4 different bills that got moved into 2 bills. Did things around a database around folks in law enforcement who've done the wrong thing, because, right now somebody can be let go of a department, go to another department very easily. And so this would allow an actual database that when you go to hire an officer that has been in another precinct who has violations, that there's a red flag. And if a department chooses to still hire that person, they have to say why they hired that person in light of these red flags. This was a bill, that we think about Antoine Rose in Pittsburgh. That officer had a history of misconduct and yet was put on another force. And so that's one of the things. We also did things around dealing with additional training. We also did things with looking at how we begin to really empower civilian oversight at a local level. And then there's one more bill that I'm forgetting right now. But these things were a direct result of the pressure that was inside the building, but also the pressure that was outside the building. I tell you, folks say, oh, well, my vote doesn't matter. I just want to try it. Let's just have one election where we all come out. Let's just try it. Let's just try it and see what happens. Because we've never even actually tried it.
No.
And we say it doesn't work. We never tried it. And so let's just try it once. We can do it next year when I run for Senate. Let's all try it. We'll just try it once and let's see what happens.
It's a good
that's
experiment.
A great idea. Why not?
I love that idea.
Give it a go.
Why not? So let's, you brought it up. Let's go there now. Let's talk about your Senate run. What makes you different than some of the other candidates? What are some things that you are for that you think Pennsylvania needs and could use from you if you got into the Senate?
Yeah, so this country, as I said before, we are at an inflection point. It's not the first time we've found ourselves here. And if history is any guide, it's not going to be the last time we found ourselves here. But what we've always seen, you pick a movement, what you've always seen is young people, new generation of leaders really rising up to address some of these systemic challenges. My grandfather, Muhammad Kenyatta, was a civil rights activist, ran for mayor of Philly in 1975. His wife, who's my last surviving grandparent, my grandma Mary, is like not an emotional person. If you know her, I've never not known her to be. She's like on it. But she called me, I guess, a year or so ago, almost crying. I'm like, Grandma, what's going on? And she said, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry because you're talking about some of the same stuff we were talking about in the 60s and 70s. She was like, I thought we had fixed some of this stuff. And here you are talking about the same things. And so I got in this race in part because I refuse to have that conversation with my grandkids. I refuse to have that conversation. And so a part of what we need to do and a part of what we're building a coalition to do is to build a community and to build a state that sees and values all of us. And what does that look like? It looks like fully funded schools with us making the deep, long-term investments in Title I schools, our lowest performing schools, making systemic, big investments. It looks like taking things like the child care tax credit and the expansion of EITC, which is giving folks an extra $300 a month starting July 15, making programs like that permanent. So that childhood poverty rate, which this program, analysts believe, could cut child poverty in half, that we can make those gains long-term. It means treating housing as an actual human right and having a tax policy and also inclusionary zoning policies that allow us to build our communities in a robust and inclusive way. It means ensuring that every single community is a community of choice where there is fresh air for you to breathe, fresh water for you to drink, dealing with the existential threat of climate change while also creating a bunch of good-paying, union, green energy jobs along the way. It means doing something about crushing student loan debt that has made it impossible for people to start a family and really build a family. It means creating a culture and creating systems in which terms like medical debt don't exist. Medical debt, number one reason you see folks going into bankruptcy. We shouldn't want to live in a country where there exists a such thing as folks going bankrupt because they got sick. It means doing something common sense about the gun violence that we've seen in our community. I have a bill that I've been pushing now for multiple sessions because we know a lot of the folks in my community who have been victims of a gun homicide. Those folks have lost their lives at the hand of an illegal gun. The person who took their life had a gun that was not registered to them. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, how do we stop that flow in supply? And we can go on and on and on. But I think, imagine a world where stories like ours are not common and where a young person's destiny is not decided from the day that they're born based on where they were born. Right. But that every single community is a place where folks can thrive and build neighborhoods for everybody. I know that it's in our capacity to do it. But a part of how we do it is we have to change the folks who are in power. You know, when folks say, oh, I don't like what if you don't like the direction of a car, the issue is not the car. The issue is who's driving the damn car. So the issue is not our democracy. The issue is whether or not we have folks in there who represent us. And we shouldn't be shocked when a majority of the folks who are members of Congress are millionaires. We shouldn't be shocked that they're not prioritizing these issues that we've been talking about today.
So a couple questions for you. I won't say they're rapid fire, but you can certainly feel free to answer them quickly as you like. You mentioned about, picking up on that last point, a bunch of people that's sitting in the Senate are millionaires. Would you take, big donations from large corporations?
I don't. No, I haven't.
What would you support a student loan forgiveness program?
I've been talking about needing to, cancel student debt, and what we need to start is doing the $50,000, which would help about 80+% of all borrowers right now. And I believe that the president has the executive authority to do that. And I'm, heartened that he's asked the Secretary of Education to look at that. And I really hope that they come back with the answer that we all know, that the president has the ability with a stroke of a pen to do that and to make, the recovery that we're seeing, make it sustainable. And that's why I talked about the child care tax credit, for example, and making the expansions of these programs permanent, because we cannot, and that's implicit in what the president said in his campaign, we can't just build back to where we were. Normal wasn't really working. We have to build back to a place that is bigger and bolder than we ever are, than it's ever been, excuse me.
What's your stance on either expansion of the Affordable Care Act or Medicare for All?
I think we need to get to Medicare for All, but I think that there are a lot of things that we can do on the way. We know that, what the president has supported and what he said he would sign, is a public option. We know that there's a bill right now that would drop the Medicare enrollment age. There are things that we can do right now to help with prescription drug prices, to help with medical debt, as I said. There are things that we can do right now to build up and fortify our public health in a way that, I'm talking about telemedicine, particularly for rural communities. And so when we talk about the jobs plan and building out broadband, yes, that's about getting on the internet to watch funny cat videos or whatever your thing is.
Surf YouTube or whatever.
You know what I mean? That's also about you being able to go to the doctor on telemedicine, and that is a necessity. But it's also about us making sure that there's a real pipeline, particularly of people of color going into STEM fields, particularly, into the medical field. Because when we think about the amount of black women in particular, the infant mortality rate and the amount of black women who we've lost, the maternity mortality crisis, on both of those things, these are things that we can do right now. And so what I'm about is making sure that every single person has health care, and whatever comes on the floor of the Senate that gives more people health care, I'm voting for that. I'm voting for that because I know exactly what it means to not have health care.
Would you support, I'm sure I know the answer to this question, but just for folks who are listening in, supporting a ban on assault rifles And would there be additional action you would take to curtail either gun violence or a better system of accountability for gun purchases?
So yes, on assault rifles, and we saw, in the 90s there was great data that actually worked, but also it's about limiting the capacity of magazines. It's also about doing something about lost and stolen guns. But when we talk about gun violence, we have to get out of only talking about gun homicide. Mm-hmm. The main way folks are dying by suicide is also with a firearm. And I'm on the governor's suicide prevention task force. And so doing something like extreme risk protection orders, when we know that somebody is a risk to themselves or others, that we can take those weapons away from them. Because particularly when you think about folks who feel so desperate or have other things going on that would give them the type of suicidal ideations that lead to the pain that so many families have dealt with, losing a loved one in that way. What you need to do is that means reduction. And so we've seen that done with bridges. If you have a bridge where a lot of folks have gone and died by suicide at that bridge, they put up a gate. And what that gate does, it gives folks time and space from the means that they would use to potentially, no longer be with us. And so we have to be really smart about using some of the targeted, things that I just mentioned that don't take away folks' right to have a weapon, but that also allow us to have reasonable restrictions that the Supreme Court and just reading the damn amendment said.
Would you be in support of? I feel like Farah has a question, but
Go
I'm going to ask you this really quickly. Yeah. Would you be in support of declaring gun violence and mental health coming out of this pandemic a public health crisis?
So we already have a resolution in the House calling gun violence a public health crisis. I also have a resolution that would designate poverty as a public health crisis, and that's not just about symbolism. Let's just have a resolution saying this thing is bad. But allowing it to be categorized as a health crisis allows us to put additional resources to bear. We've done it with the opioid crisis at the state level. The governor declared it a public health crisis, declared actually an emergency. We need to do the same thing with gun violence and with poverty.
You mentioned the judiciary and the Supreme Court. This isn't something that Democrats have been historically focused on, but now it's becoming much more mainstream to focus on and talk about. But how do you support expansion of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, we have to. We have to, because what we've seen is really eroding folks' faith and trust in our democracy, and we saw it particularly with Merrick Garland, where the rules in the plain language of the Constitution was completely ignored. And so it's not, to be clear, it's not just about the Supreme Court. It's also looking at our district and appellate courts. And we need to potentially expand there as well.
What is your stance on the filibuster?
Get rid of the filibuster.
Point blank. Majority rules?
Yeah. I mean, the filibuster is not sacred, but I think the right to vote is sacred.
Yeah.
Right.
And are we going to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act with the filibuster? Yes or no? The answer is no. And so on a variety of the things that we've discussed, for me, the question is, are we going to do something for people who really need us to do something or not? Period. Yeah. And anything that stands in the way of that, I want to fucking get rid of. Because there are people who desperately need us to do something. The filibuster has been used out throughout the course of history to block progress for communities of color, for women, for marginalized groups. And it really, at this point, has served as one of the most consistent barriers to us building that world that I talked about, where everybody lives in neighborhoods where people are safe, healthy, and whole.
Got anything?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. I guess to round this around here, bring us to a close. If, what can you say to those that are listening in out there who don't know who you are, Philly or Pennsylvania residents, or just, not really looking that far ahead into what's happening in the Senate next year? What can you, this is give you the floor to be able to speak to those folks.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is go to MalcolmKenyatta.com And so you find a lot of information there. But more importantly, what I would say is, if we're going to get from where we are to where we need to go, we need people who understand in their bones what's broken. And not because a staffer briefed them on it, not because they got a list of talking points from a fancy consultant, but because they lived it, because they experienced it, because they are collateral damage to our refusal to meet these issues head on. And I fundamentally believe that we need an actual working person in the U.S. Senate. Got my first gig at the age of 12, washing dishes, helped my mom keep the lights on. As I said earlier, moved 5 different times growing up. I went to a failing school. I live in a community right now where gun violence is the norm. I know what it means when government doesn't work, and I also know what people who are hurting need. And as I said, I don't need people to get caught up in me, but I do want them to get caught up in building a coalition that meets these challenges head on. And we have an opportunity to do that and to make some incredible history along the way, electing, well, wouldn't even be election, really 9, because we've had some black folks in the Senate who haven't been actually elected. They've been appointed as a result of a vacancy. But actually having the 12th black person ever in the U.S. Senate.
Ever. Having
the second millennial in the U.S. Senate. We have more octogenarians than millennials. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. Whether it's climate change or gun violence or student loans or healthcare or housing, we have to meet the future. We have to meet it, and meet it with bold solutions that actually lift people up. And that's what this campaign is about. And so if you've felt ignored and forgotten, this is your campaign.
State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. Farah, you got anything else?
I'm just really happy that you're here.
So happy to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. I'm just so happy. Thank you so much for coming and sitting down with us.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, it's really appreciated. You speak to a lot of things that we talk about a lot on the podcast, and we try to connect that with our listeners, and folks see me on the street sometimes, and actually I'm starting to get like a little famous when people recognize me on the street for the podcast. No, but this is
thank you for having me on, seriously, and thank you for using your platform, in the way that you have to talk to people about what's at stake, not just in terms of does this person get elected or that person get elected, but these things have real impacts on what happens in people's lives, in their real, actual lives. And so you doing this and continuing this conversation is really important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do it because I'm a nerd mostly, but because I also grew up that way, and I want to make sure the next person doesn't. So Malcolm Kenyatta, go to malcolmkenyatta.com to learn more. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, I know throughout this pandemic, everyone has been saying we're all in this together. Well, here at Salah's Corner, I want to really hear from you and what you're enduring during this pandemic. Give us a call, leave us a voice memo, and we'll play that on our next episode of Salah's Corner. That number is 267-225-5891. Share with me your thoughts, your feelings, things that you're doing to survive during this pandemic, and you'll get your memo featured on the next episode of Salah's Corner. All right, we are back. How do you feel about that interview?
That was awesome. I mean, I think it was great. I'm biased. I'm extremely biased, but I thought it was a great interview. I feel like this was one of the few times where I've seen a politician a question asked of them, and they actually provided an answer.
Yeah, that wasn't because I'm a good interviewer.
No. I'm giving all the credit to him. Doing exactly what he told me not to do.
You did.
But no, he didn't say that. No, but seriously though, I thought it was great. He was very relatable and real. Yep. And just himself, and I appreciated that. I thought it was awesome. What do you think?
It's hard for me to judge because I'm doing the interview. I will say that
I'm not a journalist or an interviewer, so I have a completely different take on this.
I would say that his story will connect with a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And, you know, the passion in which he talked about things and changing things, and the importance of not just seeing someone that looks like you holding that type of office, but also the point of like the struggle and the upbringing where he came from.
Right.
Is what you also need into that office, and not just, you know, your typical 65, 70-year-old white man. And so I think a lot of folks will gravitate towards that. And so just to make this a fair platform, you know, we will definitely be reaching out to the other candidates that are running for Senate.
Or if you're listening, or if anyone who knows them is
Feel free to get in contact with us.
I would love to come and convince me.
So the other folks that's going to be running for Senate at the moment is John Fetterman, our Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor. At the moment, Sharif Street is running an exploratory committee, which means he's probably going to run, but we'll reach out and see if we can get them on the podcast. We want to make this a fair platform and give you all that information on who to vote for.
And don't forget the woman, Val Arkush.
Yes, thank you. And Val Arkush. Yes, we will reach out to all of those candidates to give a well-rounded understanding of. We haven't done that before. Had every candidate who's running for office.
I mean, I think that'd be pretty dope if they came. We set the standard already, so they might as well come and convince me. Come and convince me. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, come and get my vote.
That's what I'm going to reach out and say. Like, y'all need to come get Vera's vote because Malcolm Kenyatta got it. No, I'm just joking. All right, so it's time for Whack Ass of the Week.
Whack Ass of the Week.
Who you got, Farah?
Okay, for my pick for Whack Ass of the Week is the state of Israel. Just like they out here bombing folks and killing people and occupying the Palestinians' land. Like, they're just fucking trash. Benjamin Netanyahu is a fucked up ass individual. They bombed. Okay, so they said that they were bombing Hamas underground tunnels, but what happened this weekend was they bombed one of these tunnels supposedly, and it was close to a residential area, and multiple buildings collapsed in the area and killed 40 people, and they were mostly women and children. So for me, the Israeli occupation gets Whack Ass of the fucking week.
Yeah, that's a good one. However, I have a different one. My Whack Ass of the Week is former police officer and SWAT team member Richard Nicoletti. Okay. He had just had a judge release all charges for pepper spraying protesters on 676 last summer during all of the uprisings in Philly. However, this is also the same officer who shot and killed Jeffrey Dennis on a complete botched stop. If you haven't seen it, I've posted it regularly on social media, but this officer is just all around trash, not just for the killing of Jeffrey Dennis, which was just a insane tragedy, but also, you know, he's shown that he's willing to just, you know, do whatever, and he literally had people with their hands up on 676 and was just spraying them with pepper spray. A judge dismissed that case, and our current district attorney, Larry Krasner, said he's going to continue to pursue charges. Yeah. So just to also give you background on this character, Richard Nicoletti, he also so in this crazy killing of Jeffrey Dennis, he pulls up to this car, and the guy, it's an unmarked police car, it's a regular car. The guy, Jeffrey Dennis, doesn't know what's happening, and the car pulls up in front of him, blocks a one-way street, so he starts to back up. Another car pulls up around him, behind him.
I know.
You know what I'm talking about,
I know exactly
right?
What you're talking about.
Yeah, and they pursue to start smashing the windows, telling him to get out of the car. No one identifies themselves as a police officer. No one is in uniform. He, by all appearance, when you watch the video, it looks like it is a mob-style attack. He goes to pull his car away, to drive away, and Richard Nicoletti opens fire and kills Jeffrey Dennis. And so Richard Nicoletti has been trashed for a while. This was back in 2019 that this took place. And in 2020, he's still doing trash stuff, pepper spraying protesters. So Richard Nicoletti gets my Whack Ass of the Week.
He's definitely whack as fuck.
Yeah. Make sure you guys head over to the IG stories, vote for Whack Ass of the Week as always.
Vote for mine though.
Well, everybody is.
Everyone is Whack Ass of the Week, but
exactly.
One is more whacker than the other.
Any closing remarks, Farah?
Support Black women. Vote. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Salah's Corner is recorded out of Rec Philly. It is a space for creative individuals. It features... I don't know what's happening today. Can't talk. Salah's Corner is recorded out of Rec Philly. It is a space for creative individuals. It's produced by Raina the Great and features my co-host sister, Farah.
Hair flip.
Hair flip indeed, y'all. Make
Lock
sure
flip.
you lock flip. I mean, it's still hair. You can still say hair
But
flip.
specifically like lock flip.
All right, make sure you guys rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. It's the best way that others can hear this platform. Make sure you share our content as well. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, peace, y'all.